Alright, as most of you know, I made a video talking about how Red got jumped by the Elite Four in a Pokemon battle. When I was making that video, I had already read the rest of the series and still thought that moment was pretty crazy. However, I forgot about the absolute monster that is Norman. For this video, get your popcorn ready to hear about the Terminator of the Pokemon world, and how he travelled the Hoenn region just to beat the hell up of his son. Now with the dramatic intro done, let's get into things. As usual, we start by saying the scene, which is literally the start of the Ruby and Sapphire chapter. Because of this, you may think, oh, we're gonna get introduced to one of the two main characters. Well, you'd be absolutely wrong, as this story starts off with the true main character. We see 5 Pokemon all getting ready to jump one man right off the bat. However, the man they're about to jump isn't just any old guy. The man opens his Pokeball and in a flash, all the Pokemon get sent flying, without us even getting to see what Pokemon he used. Of course, if you didn't know, this man is Norman. It turns out actually that he was on TV and the news that are interviewing him ask him about his family. Norman tells them that his family are soon to arrive from the Johto region and he can't wait to see them all again. We then cut to his aforementioned family with his wife and of course the star of the video, Ruby, who has zero interest in his dad being on TV. If you didn't know, this is a reference to how the Ruby and Sapphire games start. So, if you couldn't tell, the relationship between these two guys is pretty strained. Instead of watching his dad on TV, Ruby is focused on more important things, such as making his Pokemon look nice. Yeah. Ruby and his mum arrive at their new house and start unpacking their things. We then learn that it's actually Ruby's birthday, with his dad getting him a pair of running shoes. Pretty sweet, right? Ruby chucks the present and the card into the bin at first glance. He then goes on to a rant on how his dad became a gym leader, meaning he'll start paying even less attention to his family. So in response to this, Ruby's gonna run away. Instead of following his father's footsteps in becoming a battler, Ruby instead is going to travel across the Hoenn region, winning every single one of the Pokemon contests. Ruby then continues his run, saying that his father is too obsessed in Pokemon battles and he'll never let him achieve his dream. So with that, Ruby prepares his escape, but not before changing his mind and bringing along the running shoes he threw away. Oh yeah, this is a good time to let you all know that Ruby is 11 years old. In other words, perfect age to run away. Now that I think about it, that doesn't sound right. Either way, Ruby runs away and gets into the expected 11-year-old Pokemon trainer trouble. And early into his journey, he meets Sapphire, and the two encounter a wild Seviper. As Ruby favors the appearance of his Pokemon, he doesn't like to battle, meaning Sapphire has to do all the work and seemingly defeats the Pokemon. However, she passes out afterwards due to an injury she received. Things then go from bad to worse, with the Seviper getting back up. But this is where we get our first major moment of the video, as Ruby decides, aight, let me show off a little bit, by opening a Pokeball and getting the Pokemon to faint immediately. He then makes sure to let everyone know, although he doesn't like to battle, that doesn't mean he can't battle. During all this, we cut back to Little Root Town, with Ruby's mum meeting up with Professor Birch and discussing how Ruby has run away. The two decide it's time to call Norman, and Professor Birch tells Norman not to worry, he'll call the police and they'll find him. But no, missing children isn't a job for the police, it's a job for the Terminator. He crushes the phone in his hand and damn, bro's got a vein popping out of his head like he's Vegeta. Like, look at what this man's about to say. You can't be saying that, man. Kids are about to read this. We now cut back to Ruby, who's arrived in the outskirts of Pelberg City. Wanting to avoid his father, Ruby travels through the wild, where he finds Wally, who's struggling to catch a wild Pokemon. Ruby offers to help Wally catch a Pokemon, but Wally tells him, I've already got someone to teach me, and in fact, he's right here. If you're familiar with the games, you probably know who it is. Ruby makes the decision to hide as he doesn't want to get caught. Wally then speaks to Norman and asks him if he'll teach him how to catch a Pokemon now. But unlike the games, this time Norman says no, as Wally's illness is too serious for him to catch Pokemon. He continues to crush Wally's dreams and Ruby starts to get angry. However, this was Ruby's first mistake, as Norman senses the presence nearby and gets his slacking to use swagger and confuse everything in the area. Luckily, Ruby uses his Skitty safeguard to protect him from getting confused. After this, Norman thinks he must have been imagining things and leaves. From this first encounter, you can tell Ruby is afraid of this man, and he's not going to be taking any chances in running into him again. In fact, time skip a couple chapters and Ruby's been successfully avoiding his father, but what he does run into is still pretty bad, being Team Magma. Some stuff happens and Ruby ends up getting captured by them. The Team Magma member, named Blaze, starts to interrogate Ruby with the use of illusions created by Magma's heat. The illusion Ruby sees takes him back to his younger days, with, you guessed it, his dad Norman. Ruby tells his dad that he loves when he teaches him how to Pokemon battle, and that he wants to get stronger. Suddenly, everything shatters and Ruby seemingly faints. Blaze says he doesn't know what Ruby saw, but it must have been his worst nightmare. Ruby then starts to laugh, saying what he did see was in fact his very worst nightmare. which is a crazy thing to say about an illusion of your dad, but he also goes on to say that it's also his best memory, and it's what keeps him going. Alright, let's do a quick recap of what's going on here. Ruby originally ran away from his dad in order to achieve his dream of winning Pokemon contests and proving their superiority over Pokemon battle. However, we now know that when Ruby was younger, he wanted to learn how to battle just like his dad. We do also see how Ruby learned some things from his dad, such as being able to tell a Pokemon's nature and how to battle in general. So this leads now to the question, what could have happened that made Ruby want to stop battling and instead pursue contests? Well, let's keep going and maybe we'll find out. So Ruby gets away from Team Magma, but unfortunately the events of him getting captured in the first place have already begun to spread on the news. And once again, you already know who's heard this news. Norman meets with the news and also Captain Stern, who witnessed Ruby getting captured. Norman asks to be filled in on what's going on exactly. The news lady, named Gabby, thinks that Norman is here to help out with the case of Team Magma and Aqua. So she begins telling him what's been happening, but Norman pushes her aside, saying that he doesn't care about that stuff. Then he dives into the water and picks up a small Pokeblock left over from where Ruby was attacked. This was Ruby's second mistake. He also takes note of which way the current is currently flowing. After all that, he then gets out of the water, steals the data and security footage from the submarine Ruby was in, and tells everyone, "Alright, what you're struggling with is pretty bad, but honestly, I don't care. I just want to find my son who ran away." And with all that, he just leaves. But oh, not before saying, "Pardon the intrusion." That makes it all better. This man is a maniac. There is no reason for him to be that extra about everything, considering he was the one who asked to be filled in the first place. With that aside, Norman now knows the location of Ruby, meaning all he has to do is make his way there, and knowing Norman, that won't take long at all. After what happened, Ruby's been wandering around aimlessly and he meets a swimmer. The two get into some fishing shenanigans and Ruby ends up getting a feed bath. It starts to get dark and Pokemon start to attack them, so the two hide in the abandoned Weather Institute. As they wait, Ruby's Marshtomp starts to wander off, getting distracted by some Pokeblocks on the floor. Yeah, this is Ruby's third and final mistake. And honestly, I'm not liking where this is going. Ruby follows after Moo and notices that the Pokeblocks on the floor are like the ones he makes. And that's when he hears a voice from behind him, confirming exactly what he was thinking. And look at this shot. You already know this man is finished. Wrap up the arc right here, because there's no way Ruby's getting out of this alive. Ruby asks his dad, how did he find him? And Norman tells him, "You underestimate my power." The swimmer wonders where Ruby's gone, and his questions get answered with Ruby getting slammed right into the wall next to him. And with the way he hit the wall, you already know his back is in pain. The swimmer asks Ruby, what the hell is going on here? And Ruby tells him that he's about to witness the biggest family squabble in the world. And hey, Ruby, if you want to call it that, then you can call it that. But to me, this is straight up a fight. That man is your enemy, not your dad. What good guy other than Batman do you know stands in the darkness with his eyes white like that? We then cut to the news duo, Gabby and Ty, who are on their way to find Norman so that they can question Ruby about the team that captured him. And what they're greeted with is an insane man holding his son above the Weather Institute with lightning around him. First off, this panel goes hard. Pop off, Norman. Second off, I'm convinced Norman is crazy because he's holding his son up like a lightning rod while there's lightning around him everywhere. Man, it's a good thing the news are here because you, sir, need to be behind bars. You know, at this point, this is going to be a new thing on this channel. Others can have their Black Air Force energy table, but this channel, we're going to have the prison table. So far on the list, we got Lance the Terrorist, Silver the Thief, and now Norman, who I'm not going to enable because I don't want to get demonetized. Okay, back to the fight now. Sorry for the confusion, but we're going to have to switch translation here, because this censors what really happens in this fight. So Ruby demands his father release him, and Norman calls him an insolent brat for speaking like that. But all the guy did was ask for him to be released. His present for wanting his own freedom, Ruby gets a punch to the face. At this point, I'm just going to start calling Norman Vegeta with the way he's treating Ruby. Norman then starts to ask Ruby why he ran away from home, and Ruby realizes there's only 3 choices to make it out right now. 1, being to apologize, going against everything he stood for. 2, try to run away and escape, which we already know is never going to work. And 3, the last choice, being to fight his dad and defeat him right here and now. Meaning you know what time it is. Ruby then tells the swimmer that he must not watch this battle by any means, and then he enters serious mode. Quick explanation, this is when Ruby gets serious and his eyes start to look more like Norman's. He uses this later again to scare off some Pokemon. Now with all the pieces together, let's begin this battle. Ruby and Norman enter a double battle, with Ruby telling his dad that he won't give up and go home. Instead, he'll win all the Pokemon contests. Norman deflects Ruby's attacks and tells him that the one who taught him every attack, every strategy, and most importantly all his Pokemon are all known to him. Ruby agrees with him, but now he has a new member on his team, being Marshtomp. He also agrees that he knows his other Pokemon, which is why they were being used as decoys for his true attack, being Marshtomp using Mud Shot through pipes. Ruby keeps on the offensive with his Mud Shots, but Norman quickly starts to catch on, so the two start to enter a stalemate with each other. However, Ruby has the advantage with the rain being on his side. Norman then uses his secret weapon, being Slacking, who was using Bulk Up. Slacking attacks by grabbing the stairs under Ruby and swinging them around, leaving them hanging off the edge of the building. With nowhere left to go, Norman then tells Ruby that he needs to stop being so stubborn and just come with him quietly. Ruby doesn't back down and prepares his most powerful attack, being a literal cannon. But before he can unleash it, the weather changes to harsh sunlight, thanks to the weather duo's cast form using Sunny Day. Suddenly, things take a bad turn as the bridge of stairs they were standing on starts to fall down. Coming from this dramatic moment, we now have Ruby's mother at home in Ruby's room. She thinks about how Ruby threw away the card that his dad gave him before even reading it. Inside this card actually held a surprise, being that they were going to hold a birthday party for him. And at this said party, Ruby's dad was going to tell him that he can partake in Pokemon contests now. We then get to see a full flashback, with Norman telling his wife that he's going to let Ruby partake in contests, due to him being the age of 11, which is adventure age in Pokemon. Norman then goes on to say that he does wish that Ruby would continue battling, as his talent far surpasses his own, but Ruby should still decide his own path. This is actually pretty sad, as this whole fight could have been avoided if Ruby wasn't so rash and just read his birthday card. Of course I can't blame Ruby entirely, as Norman himself was clearly too intense for Ruby to speak with him properly. We now cut back to the fight, with Norman reaching his hand out to Ruby, who's falling down the crumbling stairs. Eventually the stairs break and the two barely survive, with Norman managing to hang on to a branch by the nearby trees. And due to the sharp rubble underneath them, if they fall, there's no way they're making it out of it alive. The branch then snaps and the two begin to fall, but at the very last second, Norman reminds Ruby of his running shoes, which activate launching the two of them away from the rubble. By the way, running shoes in the Pokemon manga are super overpowered, or at least Ruby's pair anyway. This way of ending the fight is actually really nice, as it brings the story full circle in a way, as they were a gift from a father to a son, and it saved both their lives. This nice moment then gets ruined as Norman wants to continue this battle. Fortunately, Ruby is saved by Winona and Flannery showing up, who give Norman a much needed reality check, due to him just leaving his gym without notifying anyone. So Norman tells Ruby that he disobeyed his parents, then ran away, so now he can just do whatever he wants. But in return, he should accomplish his goals. Since he made the choice to run away from home, he shouldn't think about returning home until he's done what he wanted to do. He then gives back Ruby his Pokeblock case, which he dropped at Slateport, and tells him to keep his belongings safe, and most importantly, to call his mother. And with that, Norman takes his leave. Ruby, although partly unconscious, thanks his dad, ending the fight here. After this, a ton, and I mean a ton of stuff happened, but I have to leave that for another video. Okay, so that brings this video to an end. I hope you enjoyed another episode of Pokemon Adventures' greatest moments. Let me know your thoughts on this battle. Also, who do you think was more in the right, Ruby or Norman? And lastly, let me know what moment you'd like to see next. With all that said and done, take care.